You may remember back in 2016, Daniel Hannan said quite a lot of stuff about Brexit. And to be honest, I would reckon at some point in the future, there is probably a really good video opportunity for me to make like the top 10 things Daniel Hannan uh, claimed that Brexit would do for the UK. um, it would be an interesting video. But one of the things he said, besides, of course, only a fool would leave the single market, is that if we did leave the single market, that it wouldn't matter. Because what would happen was America would look to us and they would build upon this special relationship we have, and we would go forward together and we would build this amazing new trade agreement together that would make making staying in the single market and customs union look completely and absolutely silly. That was basically the whole gist. And Brexiteers continued all this delusional thought that America was going to come any second, any day now, and offer us this amazing trade deal. But of course, as you remember, Barack Obama, and remember, Biden was his deputy at the time, said, well, sorry, but we're not that into you, essentially. You'd go to the back of the queue because we'd actually be more interested in doing, and talking with the EU. And we have seen that. America has instead gone and talked to, not only Macron, but with Merkel and, of course, now Schultz. They've talked to France and Germany and the EU and Ursula von der Leyen far more than they have ever talked to the UK since Brexit. And now, as we'll get into it in a bit, there is now a new, potentially at least an outline, an initial outline of a new agreement between the EU and the USA. And it shows 100% why Brexit is such a failure. So before we go diving into this, let me first again welcome you to the channel. And of course, please do remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a donation link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can buy me coffee. And of course, there is the Pony Club down below as well. You can join, and of course, the Patreon as well. And of the YouTube thank you button too. Remember, it is Wednesday today, so there will be a new Pony Club video for our Patreon and Pony Club members. So watch out for that today as well. And if you want to have access not only to that video, but all the other content and Pony Club videos we have made as well, like I say, click on the links down below and sign up, and welcome to the Pony Club, as they say. So what has been going on? What is this agreement? Well, it all has to do with Biden's Inflation Reduction Act. Because in that act is a monumental amount of money to essentially ensure that the USA reduces its reliance on foreign materials and metals in particular, so it doesn't have to rely on China to be able to build its new economic green industries of the future, and to ensure that it maintains its lead in the technological area of this. And in doing so, it has basically said by the end of this year, any country it does not have a free trade agreement with, which is China and the EU and the UK, well, like I say, we're including those for the time being. But again, it's, as we've said, shows why this is such a failure. This whole sort of deal that, again, in the Inflation Reduction Act basically says, look, batteries and all these green technologies, if these minerals are not extracted or processed in the UK, not in the UK, in the US, then essentially, if more than, I think, 60% of it, you do not get this tax credit, which, to be honest, is a lot more attractive to the companies. So it it is basically protectionism. And as we've said before, there is nothing wrong with a country engaging in protectionism. Um, Something the Brexiteers complain about constantly when we're in the EU. But hey, that protectionism extended to our own businesses as well. And of course, America's allowed to do this after all. It is a sovereign country. Of course, something else the Brexiteers never encountered on, thinking that our sovereignty was a one-way street and everyone would have to respect it. No, because other countries have their own sovereignty and they can do what they essentially what they want to do. Doesn't matter that we have left the EU and we are now a sovereign 100% country. So, initially, what this new deal with the EU and the US gets to is an initial outline of sharing of these materials because in the US, they have tungsten, but not as much as there is in Europe. So obviously, there is now an agreement being talked with the USA and the EU to sign up, not to do a free trade agreement, but at least to do some sort of agreement where the USA can have sort of access to the materials in the EU, and of course the EU can then sell those materials over into the USA, so they don't have to compete with the tariff. So it's a win-win for both the USA and the EU, and it's not a full trade agreement, which would means that again, currently with how sort of the Congress and the, sort of the Senate is lining out in a very sort of 50-50 state, means they don't have to put it through Congress. It can just be done without going through that. So this is a massive win for not only the EU, and of course, it works out well for the USA in their plans for creating this green energy future. So, where does the UK fit into this? Well, it doesn't. In fact, Kemi Badenoch went to the US recently, didn't even get to meet with Biden. And she met with not even her counterpart, but the guy who was in charge, I believe, of the trade. Oh, what was his name now? I can't remember what his name is now. Can't find it, unfortunately. But yeah, he uh, basically Badenoch went over there to try and knock on these doors and say, "Can we be part of this as well? Can we do something like this as well?" And essentially, Badenoch came away empty-handed because, as we've said numerous times before, we are not a big market when you look at the sizes of what the EU and the USA is. The thing is, the EU has basically said, look, if you lock us out of those of that stuff, which we would do at the end of the year without this agreement, we will retaliate. And because the EU is such a bigger market, the US has to listen. It has to pay attention. It can't ignore that threat. Whereas if Kemi Badenoch were to make that threat, the USA doesn't have to listen because we're not as big a market as the EU. And this all goes back to one of the big points we made during the referendum that look, if we leave, we are not this big market. We are not this amazing trade nation. And it just goes to show you why Brexit is such a failure. Because for all the promises that were made about global Britain and how we'll be this amazing nation promoting free trade, other countries just don't have to listen to you making that. Sure, you can go up and say it as Badenoch did and went on a trip to America, but she came back empty-handed. She came back with nothing because the USA just didn't have to listen. And what's the funny thing is now is that this whole Inflation Reduction Act has also worried South Korea and Japan, but this has now made them engage more with the Trans-Pacific Partnership because now they're like, well, hold on, if we create the Trans-Pacific Partnership with sort of Japan, South Korea, Australia, Indonesia, and sort of the other couple of countries, well, now we've got a big economic bloc of our own, which we could use. And interestingly enough, this looks like it could be potentially moving the Trans-Pacific Partnership more to reflect the EU. So interesting times certainly over there, for sure. And of course, it would be kind of funny if the UK still wants to try and join the Trans-Pacific Partnership when it looks like that certainly South Korea and Japan are now recognizing the power that they could have if they were to transform the Trans-Pacific Partnership into something that resembled the EU. So, oh, and finally, before we go, I just want to bring up Badenoch's comments because she complained that the USA was engaging in protectionism, that this was not fair. Well, once again, USA doesn't have to care. It can engage in protectionism all it wants. It's a sovereign country. It gets to do that. Once again, proving that just because you have sovereignty, so what? Doesn't mean that, the USA is suddenly going to start listening to you. So this agreement, or at least this initial outline agreement between the EU and the USA, shows 100% just why Brexit is such a failure. So, as always, thank you very much for watching. Please remember to hit that like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, as always, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.